Well, I'm excited. I hope you are too, because it's Friday, time for the Morning Pitt Mailbag. The best day of the week here on the Morning Pitt, the best day of the week in general. I always look forward to it. I hope you do as well. Certainly everybody looking forward to Pitt Stanford tomorrow. That's a 3:30 Eastern time kickoff, 12:30 local time if you're in the Pacific time zone. Pitt hasn't been in the Pacific time zone since for a regular season game since 1979, so it's been a minute, as the kids might say. We'll see how the Panthers do against the Cardinal tomorrow. If you didn't see it on Wednesday, we had an article about how Pitt exactly was planning and preparing to adjust to the time zone change, and how they changed their schedule this week, and how they approached scheduling this trip in order to account for it. You should check it out. Great. Well, I don't know if it's a great article. I think it's a great. What's the word I want to say? I think there's really good insight into the process and how they go about scheduling any road trip, and then how they adjusted their plans for this road trip out west to take on Stanford. We've talked a lot about that game, talked a lot about it on the live show on Wednesday night, broke down the matchups yesterday here on the Morning Pitt, and now Friday we'll roll into the weekend with the Morning Pitt Mailbag. We've got great questions from you, the Pitt fans, on Panther-Lair.com about everything from Pitt's current team and the freshmen on the team to recruiting and basketball and everything else, including a really interesting question about which game would it have been better for Pitt to win, West Virginia or Louisville? And I think that's a pretty interesting question that I actually had to think a lot about. And as we sit here recording this, I'm still not entirely sure of my answer. We'll talk it through. We'll work it out together. We'll get to that. That'll be our last question. So when we get to that one, we're almost to the end, and hopefully by then I'll have an answer for it. But you can think about your answer between now and then. And in the meantime, we'll get to a bunch of other great questions. So let's do it. The Morning Pitt Mailbag here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I've been asking you all week, and everybody's been really stepping up. It's been awesome to see, but do me a solid here. Click that subscribe button. We've got a real chance to get to 5,000 subscribers on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com before the Stanford game kicks off tomorrow, which would be incredible. I don't want to sit here on the post-game show tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow evening begging people to subscribe. I don't even have to talk about it at all. I want to be at 5,000 subscribers, and we don't have to worry about it. We can just talk about Pitt Stanford and what we saw in that game. And, of course, that's one of the upsides to subscribing to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com is you can turn on the notifications and get an alert sent to your phone whenever we go live. So I don't know what time tomorrow's post-game show is going to start. I'm thinking around 7:30. I hope around 7:30, but who knows? Might be earlier, might be later. Might be later, depending on how that game goes and how long that game goes. So you can keep an eye on social media or the message boards. We'll post it there when we settle on a start time. But the best way to make sure you don't miss it is to subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com and turn on the notifications. So click the subscribe button. We need 30 more people to subscribe to get to 5,000 subscribers. I would be really excited about that, and I would really appreciate it if you did it. So subscribe, and let's move on. Questions this week. Chad Pap 3 has the first question in the mailbag this week. Says, Chris, have you heard anything from practice about some of the younger players that are deep reserves or redshirting? Obviously, some freshmen are playing meaningful roles, but I'm curious to hear if there's anything encouraging that we don't see on the field every Saturday. And, I think the quarterback's going to be pretty good. It's interesting. As I was after this question, I was like, well, let me look at the freshman class again and see which guys really jump out. And I'm like, okay, first guy on the list here, Josh Garrier. Well, we're seeing him all the time. We know he's playing. Okay, next guy on the list, Sinquan Smith. Well, he's been hurt for a long time, just kind of recently got reactivated. Okay, let's go to the next one, Shep Turk. So I think Shep Turk, I think there's a optimism about him. I don't think he got on the field yet this season. I can double check that. I don't think he played against Duquesne. He might have gotten a snap here or there, but I know they were excited to bring him in, and I think I think they liked what they saw out of him in training camp. And then as you work down the list, like Bryce Yates and Mason Heintschel, we've obviously seen those guys a lot. Tony Kinsler's been out there. Jakarian Turner has played. Max Hunt we've seen on the field a little bit. Sean Lee Jr. has been really good. Juju Anderson and Emmanuel Taylor and Justin Thompson all got time in this last game. So a lot of these guys have played. I don't know if it'll probably end up being fewer guys redshirt out, or more guys don't redshirt out of this class than we've seen in recent years. But a lot of them are playing, and a lot of them are really contributing. one or two guys is hurt. I think Denham Cook might be out. Maybe for the season. He's been on the listed as out on the availability report each week. So I think he's, we're not going to see him anytime soon. But I mean, looking through the list, they obviously like Torian Chester. They talked a lot about him in training camp, and forget if he got in last week with the backup offensive line, but I think they like him as a young offensive lineman. I think these, D-ends and linebackers, Juju Anderson and Emmanuel Taylor and Justin Thompson. Anderson is a D-end. We've seen him, I think, in one game. And then Taylor and Thompson have played a little bit here in the past couple of weeks as they've run into that, they've run into the injury issues at linebacker, and particularly outside linebacker. Thompson has gotten some reps as the middle linebacker. I think to some extent he was the backup middle linebacker last week. Now, obviously they had A.B. Ibrahim starting and Braylon Lovelace swapping in there, so it would take both of those guys getting hurt for Justin Thompson to be on the field at middle linebacker. But I mean, he was repping with the twos when they lined up for their pregame warmups, and so not that far away. I think Trevor Summers has gotten some positive pub as a big defensive tackle prospect. This year on the scout team, and also what he did in training camp. So I mean, we're seeing the real highlights on the field. Mason Heintschel and Jakirine Turner. Bryce Yates has been good. Josh Garrier has been good. Sean Lee has been awesome. But I think there's some really good players in this class. This class, and obviously when you get headlined by a big-time quarterback and who's playing like Mason Heintschel is, it's going to make the whole class look better. But this class overall, I think, looks really good, has gotten a lot of positive and rave reviews so far, and I think they're just going to keep getting better. I think the ceiling's really high for this team, this freshman class coming in. Next question, Smenges says, games are won in the trenches is a common statement. What do the numbers say about, and what's your grade for Pitt's defensive line and offensive line this season? I should have had Pitt's numbers pulled up here. I'm just going to bring up like the pressure numbers. I mean, you can see, if you want to go look at Pitt's stats, you can see what the defensive line has been producing. Just kind of scrolling through real quickly, you've got Francis Brew has 3 tackles for loss and a sack, but I think that was early in the season. Isaiah Neal's got 3 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. Sean Fitzsimmons has 2 tackles for loss and 1 sack. Zach Crothers had 3 TFLs and 1.5 sacks before he got hurt. Nick James, 4.5 and 2. Jimmy Scott has 5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. Blaine Spires has 4.5 and 2 in limited playing time so far. Joey Zielinski, 3 and 1.5. Jasir Whittington, 1.5 tackles for loss and 1 sack. You're getting some production out of those guys. You're not having that one guy who's just dominating in terms of sacks and tackles for loss from the defensive line. Jimmy Scott tied with Braylon Lovelace for the team lead in pressures through 8 games with 18. Francis Brew and Isaiah Neal and Nick James have 12 each. Joey Zielinski and Sean Fitzsimmons have 11 pressures each. Blaine Spires has 10 pressures in 5 games. One of those he left early due to injury, and I think his reps were kind of limited in this last game when he came back. The Louisville game he left after 26 snaps. The NC State game he only played 12, and so to put up 10 pressures in 5 games played, but really 3 full games, that's pretty solid work from him. Crothers had 8 pressures in 4 games. I think that's one of the big disappointments about Pitt's defensive line this year. As we talk about the injuries, I mean, it's been not having Jaden Moore all season yet. I still think he'll come back. My guess, again, I've said a few times that I'm sort of circling that Notre Dame game as the time he returns, and then maybe they can get 3 really good games out of him to finish the regular season. But Jaden Moore is a big one. But losing Zach Crothers after 4 games is a real bummer because he was playing really well. He was one of the breakout stars on this team, and I mean that was through the Louisville game before the biggest breakout star of the season made his first career start the next week. But Zach Crothers was just playing really, really well, and it's and seemed to be getting better week after week. And it's unfortunate that he got hurt and is out for the season because I think if you had him and you had Blaine Spires, never whether you want to add Jaden Moore in there or not, but if you had Crothers and Spires to go with Jimmy Scott and then Joey Zielinski as like your fourth guy and Nate Temple as your fifth guy, like I think you'd have a much more effective defensive end rotation than what you've had. And I like what they've gotten out of Isaiah Neal since moving him from defensive tackle to defensive end. I think it's been a really positive move and a positive change for Neal and for Pitt's defense. But I mean, your ideal would still be having, those defensive ends playing defensive end and the defensive tackles playing defensive tackle. In terms of a grade, I think Pitt's defensive line has been fine. I don't think they've gotten as much pressure on the quarterback and made as many plays in terms of sacks, but I think they've done a good job at shutting down the run. I think they did get pushed around a little bit by Florida State, but Florida State is one of the bigger and probably better offensive lines they're going to face all year. Notre Dame would be another one, I would think. So they got pushed around a little bit in that game, but on the whole, I think Pitt's defensive line, has played pretty well. I would probably give them a B. And the only reason it wouldn't be an A is because you don't have that sort of standout big number guy, in terms of production thus far. Maybe somebody will break out and have like a 3-sack game or something like that, but you just haven't had that so far. And so the numbers aren't really all that impressive. As far as the offensive line, I think they've been pretty good. Up and down. Gave up a lot of pressure and 7 sacks at Syracuse, of course. Some of that's on Mason Heintschel. A lot of that's on the offensive line. I think one of the things that's most remarkable to me about Pitt's offensive line this year is what we talked about all offseason with the transfers that they brought in. That the idea was, if injuries happen, be better prepared for it. If your injuries happen, be ready to sort of absorb them and kind of weather that storm and move on. And so far that's kind of what they've done. They lost their starting left guard for the season, and they lost Jeff Percy for how many games now? When was the last time that Percy played? Let me see. I've got, there it is. He played 5 games. So he hasn't played since the Boston College game, and he got hurt on the first drive of that game. So he played 4 full games and 1 drive of the 5th game. So he's missed the last 3, almost 4 full games. And they've been able to keep going. Now, after that Boston College game, 2 weeks later, they had the Syracuse game, and it was not good for the offensive line. But on the whole, I think they did a pretty solid job the rest of the Boston College game, which is when they had, they obviously lost Keith Gouvet at the Louisville game. So after the first drive at Boston College, you had new players stepping in at left guard and left tackle, and they did a pretty good job the rest of that game. I thought they did a pretty good job at Florida State. They didn't have a great game at Syracuse, but then they did a pretty good job against NC State. And so I would give them a pretty good grade, like a B+. I don't think they've been able to establish the run as well as you would like, and so that's probably why it stays below an A. But at the same time, I think you have to look at what they're working with. This isn't, it's not really a run scheme that's designed to be all that effective, I think. Not that they don't want the run game to be effective, but the emphasis is obviously with the pass. And they had that big game against NC State, and Mason Heintschel threw 48 passes. That's the kind of approach Cade Bell wants to take, is move the ball through the air. And so I don't want to ding Pitt's offensive line too much for the run blocking, but they just haven't been all that effective at it, but there also isn't all that much commitment to it, and maybe not all that much dedication to actually making it work. And so, I ding them a little bit, but I think they've been good. And again, they've been able to weather the storm with the injuries. Now, that can only go so far if they have another injury with, Lyndon Cooper or B.J. Williams or Ryan Baer, or even the 2 guys who are filling in on the left side, Kendall Stanley or Ryan Coretta, then it's going to be another story. But they've been able to weather 2 extended injuries and not fall off too much. And so I give them a pretty good grade for that. Like I say, that's why I would go B+ at least. I mean, that's probably B+ is where I would settle. Potter County native says, who will have the next Pitt 6 and what game will it occur? Let's see. I mean, Bengal Branson, the Stanford quarterback, I think he's thrown like 7 interceptions this season or something like that. And so he would be a candidate. You could potentially get one there. But I'm going to go for the dramatic and say that they get a big pick six against Notre Dame. Full house, big crowd, excited crowd, and all that stuff. And somebody comes up with a big play. Sean Lee Jr. comes up with a big play and gets Cruz Brookins gets back and gets a big pick six out of it. And everybody gets really excited, and the place will be rocking. So that's what I would go for. Let's say it happens at Notre Dame, or against Notre Dame. GPL PGH H2P says, will Kavir Baines Marquez's eligibility be exhausted after this season since he's a fifth year? It appears he played significant minutes in 2022, 23, and 24 at UC Davis. Are there still going to be waivers available for players that may have a case for an additional season? Let's just look at Kavir Baines Marquez career real quick. Just bring up his bio on Pitt's website. UC Davis 2021 through 2024 is when he was there. It would seem that he probably played enough over the course of those seasons to burn a red shirt and not really have an opportunity for an extra year. I mean, like, if they feel like there's some unique thing that they can apply to the NCAA over, you might as well send in the application. You know what I mean? Apply for the waiver. Like, you don't lose anything by sending it in, and who knows? You might, if you have a non-zero chance of getting an extra year for a guy, you might as well send the paperwork in and see what happens. My guess though is this is his final year. But he's been a revelation. He's been a heck of a find for Pitt. Obviously, the way he has fit in with this defense, either playing safety, playing linebacker, playing in third down, and 2 different types of third down packages, he's done an outstanding job and has been a really great addition and has just made this defense deeper and I think better overall. Chevy Troutman, probably not the real one, says when the Notre Dame game comes around in 2 weeks, and the linebacker room is presumably healthier, we're going to see the same effort and creativity to find ways to keep Cam Lindsey on the field as we saw with the new package last week. I feel like he's more than earned playing time, even in a room of All-Americans. The new package last week, that Night Stalkers package, I don't think it was necessarily designed to find ways to keep Cam Lindsey on the field. It was designed because they felt like they didn't have enough linebacker depth to play the Delta package that they like to play. Look, I think Cam Lindsey has done a lot over the last 2 weeks to earn himself more playing time. When you have Kyle Lewis and Rasheem Biles available, though, you're not getting, those guys are playing upwards of 85% of the defensive snaps because they are your 2 best players. They're probably the 2 best players on the team. I mean, maybe Mason Heintschel put himself into that category in the last few games, but I mean, they are probably your 2 best players on the team. And so I think as promising as Cam Lindsey looks, as well as he has played, and as high as the ceiling is, and how good I think he's going to be next year, I don't think you look for reasons to take Kyle Lewis off the field. You don't look for reasons to take Rasheem Biles off the field. Now, maybe he's done enough in the last couple of weeks to give you the confidence that you can rest those guys a little bit more, but they're still your best players, and you still need to ride with your studs. And I thought it was interesting. I mean, Pat Narduzzi said it on Monday. We talked to Ryan Manilak, the linebackers coach, about it on Wednesday, that, Cam Lindsey has played well, but there's still a lot of details he needs to clean up, and that he knows that, and that he's learning from it. And so I think you try to find ways to nurture that process and bring him along and keep getting him to where he needs to be. And you also, potentially give Biles and Lewis a little more rest than maybe you were able to early in the season. But those 2 guys are still your guys. Those are still the guys. And when we talk about, the next pick 6, I said like Cruz Brookins or somebody. I mean, it very well could be Kyle Lewis or Rasheem Biles because that's what they do. And they're really good at it. So I don't think you're looking for reasons or ways to take those guys off the field. But if you want to be able to rest them and keep them fresh throughout the game and throughout the season, you probably feel a little more confident in doing it by putting Cam Lindsey out there, probably a little more confident than you were at the beginning of the season or even 3 weeks ago. Zenmeister 1992 says, after 2 exhibition games and the season opener being on Monday, which newcomer to the Pitt basketball team are you most interested in seeing play and develop this year? I mean, the easy answer is Omari Witherspoon. I think Omari Witherspoon is going to be really good for Pitt this season. I think he's going to play a lot. He's going to play a lot of positions. I think he's going to score a lot. I think he's going to do a lot on both ends of the court. I mean, I think he's going to be fun to watch. Like, that's the thing about Omari Witherspoon is he's just a fun player to watch. He's got so much energy and brings so much of that to the court that it's fun to watch him out there playing. So he's the guy at the top of the list. Makari Moore is really interesting. I don't know if he's the number 2 newcomer for me that I'm most interested in seeing, but I think he's going to be really good. He's going to be the backup point guard, and he's going to play a lot. You know, these exhibition games have changed my view on Noyes Intersitis. Like, I didn't think he was going to be bad or anything like that, but he showed some toughness. I think he is the best three-point shooter on the team. He can drive a little bit, and I get the feeling he wants to be a spark plug for the team. You know, I think he wants to do that. He wants to be that, and he's done a good job at being that so far, you know, in those 2 exhibition games. So I'm interested to see him as well. And then, of course, look, when Roman Cialepa's on the court, you're keeping an eye on him most of the time. Now, he's still kind of timid, still kind of figuring it out, but he will figure it out. And when he does, he's going to be a beast out there. And I think it'll happen this season. I think it'll happen slowly, but incrementally, that he will figure things out a little bit at a time. And then, you know, by mid-January or mid-February, I think he's going to be pretty tough to defend. So I think he'll be fun to watch. Jiminy Pickett says, if they had to re-rank the 2025 recruiting class today, is Mason Heintschel the number 1 recruit in the country? And if not, would he be close? I also feel like low-key this class could be one of our best recruiting classes ever, considering the impact some of these freshmen have had already. You know, at some point we'll compare recruiting classes once we get a couple years down the road with this group and see what they become. Would Mason Heintschel be the number 1 recruit in the country? I don't know. I don't know. That's tough. I was looking, ESPN had a thing last week re-ranking college football's top freshmen after 2 months of the season. Now, Mason Heintschel did not make this list, but this was in the aftermath of the Syracuse game. I suspect if they did this list this week, he might be on there. But there are a handful of quarterbacks on here. Malik Washington at Maryland, Bear Bachmeier at BYU, Bryce Underwood at Michigan, and JKS, who I don't even attempt to pronounce, at Cal. And those guys actually make 4 of the top 5 here. When you look at all their stats, like Mason Heintschel is right there with all of these guys, and almost all these guys have played like 8 games. Like Malik Washington at Maryland has played 7 games and thrown almost 270 passes this season. Bear Bachmeier has played 8 games and thrown 200 passes. Bryce Underwood has played 8 games and thrown 200 passes. JKS has played 8 games and thrown almost 300 passes. Mason Heintschel, as we know, has played 5 games really, but 4 starts and attempted about 150 passes. So his volume is well below these guys, but he's only a few hundred yards. He's not that far off in terms of yardage and overall play and production. I think he would be ranked among the top 5 quarterbacks in the class of 2025. Last year, he was ranked as the number 43 pro-style quarterback. Yes, the number 43 pro-style quarterback in the country. All of those guys I just mentioned, 3 of them were ranked in the top. Like Underwood was the number 1 overall recruit in the country, the number 1 quarterback in the country, and the number 1 overall recruit. Malik Washington was the number 5 quarterback and the number 54 overall recruit, and JKS was the number 65 overall recruit, the number 7 quarterback. The one exception would be Bear Bachmeier, who was number 34 among quarterbacks. He's ended up being quite good at BYU, but still ranked higher than Mason Heintschel. I think those 5 guys would be the top 5 quarterbacks in the class, and I think Mason Heintschel will be right there. I haven't watched those other 4 enough to say, well, I would definitely put him ahead of Bachmeier, but not Washington, or he's definitely better than JKS, but not not Underwood. Like I haven't watched those other guys enough to say it, but his performance through 4 starts is every bit. It's enough to put him in that conversation of being among the top freshman quarterbacks in the country and probably the top overall freshman in the country. I think, I know there's some dedicated college football fans who watch a lot of college football, if you've watched a lot of Bachmeier and Underwood and JKS and Washington, what's your take? How does Heintschel compare in his 4 starts compared to what those guys have done this season? All right, final question. I said I would think about this the whole episode. I haven't thought about it once since I said that. Comes from Jay Lazinger. If you had to pick between Pitt winning the West Virginia or the Louisville game, which would you pick? I feel like most would go Louisville, so Pitt would be undefeated in the ACC, but I worry that the West Virginia loss will actually hurt Pitt more in the potential playoff rankings. So, the thing about the playoff rankings that you always have to keep in mind is that they are, made of people, and so people, unlike a computer, and maybe a computer can be taught to do this, but people will look at it and see that, if you're considering Pitt for a potential playoff ranking spot, right? You're going to look at it and you say, okay, they're 6-2. They lost at West Virginia. West Virginia is not good. They lost to Louisville. But there is a quarterback change, and it makes them a different team. And they've shown in the past that they will adjust their thoughts on a team based on personnel if they feel like it changes that team significantly. Florida State 2 years ago, right? Well, the quarterback goes out, and now Florida State is not the same team. Well, Pitt is not the same team that it was in the first 4 games. Pitt is not the same team now than it was when it lost at West Virginia. Pitt is not the same team now that it was when it lost to Louisville. And I think if you are ranking it subjectively, a person sitting down looking at a team and their resume, not just of who they've beaten, but kind of who they are and how they've been going through the season, you're going to look at it and say that this Pitt team is different, and if they win against Stanford, they're 7-2, they're 5-0 since changing the quarterback. They only have 2 losses, and those 2 losses were in the first 4 games. Maybe that helps you. So that's your second part about the West Virginia game hurting their playoff resume more. In terms of the ACC, yeah, I think, if you beat Louisville, you're 5-0 in the conference. You're also 7-1 in overall. You're ranked right now, and Louisville is 3-2, and so you've eliminated one of those teams that you need help to get ahead of. Because, I think I said yesterday we were going to start scoreboard watching, and I completely forgot to do that. But Georgia Tech and Virginia are the 2 undefeated teams in conference play. Pitt only plays one of them, so they need help. They need Virginia to lose a game, and ideally 2. Louisville right now has 1 loss, just like Pitt. Pitt's loss is to Louisville, so Pitt needs help for Louisville to lose. SMU has 1 loss. Duke has 1 loss. I don't know how the tiebreakers would shake out with those teams, but you want help. You want those teams to lose, and then Miami, of course, has the 1 loss, and Pitt plays them head-to-head, so you have an opportunity to control your own destiny there. But when you're talking about comparing to Louisville, you're talking about comparing to SMU, you're talking about comparing to Duke, where you need help for these teams to lose in order to help your cause, you don't need that help if you beat Louisville. You're 5-0, Louisville's 3-2. You have an advantage, you're 1 game ahead in the loss column against SMU and Duke. And you're tied with Virginia, so you get, you need a little less help if you're able to get that Louisville game. So I don't know. I guess I would probably choose that because it still comes down to, if you're talking about playoffs, Pitt, the most direct path for Pitt and most teams to get into the playoffs is by winning the conference championship. And so that's in the long run. The Louisville game matters more and carries more weight and would have a greater impact on Pitt's chances as opposed to the West Virginia game. But I know Pitt fans hate to lose to West Virginia. Playoff resumes aside, I know Pitt fans hate to lose to West Virginia. And so I can understand if you would say, no, give me the win over West Virginia. I don't care about Louisville. But I think, probably for what this team wants to achieve this season or potentially could achieve, beating Louisville would have had a little bit more of an impact and helped the cause a bit more. All right, great questions this week. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Don't forget, we'll be live after the game tomorrow for the post-game show. We will drink and we will talk and we will have a great time. So I always look forward to that. I enjoy those things, and I hope you do as well. So like and subscribe. Tune in tomorrow, and we'll talk about the game after it happens. Stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com for all the coverage of the game and everything that goes on with Pitt Stanford. And I think that's about it. Thanks for watching the videos this week, folks. Hope you have a great Friday. Hope you have a great weekend. Enjoy the game tomorrow. We'll talk to you after it for the Panther-Lair postgame show right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.